This is the Grow Your Clinic podcast from Clinic Mastery. We help progressive health professionals to lead inspired teams, transform client experiences, and build clinics for good. Now, it's time to grow your clinic.
Welcome to the Grow Your Clinic podcast. My name is Ben Lynch. If you believe that numbers are boring, we share something in common. But that is until you meet my next guest, Shane Bennett. Shane leads Beyond, a team of 90 in Melbourne, 90. That's across physio, osteo, podiatry, and EP, delivering a really first-class experience. They reimagine the healthcare experience. And through this conversation, we talk about how numbers are so impactful in your decision-making about growing and scaling your clinic, and how it's so important for you to know which levers to pull to ultimately do that in a profitable and sustainable manner. We talk about how to budget and that most clinics actually don't run by a budget, but how to do it thoughtfully and purposefully as a clinic owner so that you relate to it, and even if you don't love it, you know how to do it and you know how it serves you in growing your clinic sustainably. All right, let's pick up the conversation with Shane now. So one of the things that you've spoken a lot about over a long period of time are budgets and the importance of budgets. In fact, I don't know when it was, a couple of years back, that you said it's astounding to me the amount of clinics that join the CM community that are sizable clinics, you know, in terms of headcount, team, revenue, etc., business success, you know, in quotation, that just don't have a budget. They don't really look at their numbers, etc. Why do you think people don't have a budget? Like, what maybe the case is, well, we're doing okay. It hasn't bitten us in the bum yet, but why is that so shocking to you that people don't have a budget?
I think it comes about from the fact that a lot of the clinics have often started from scratch. And so as their clinic's grown, they're in the moment, and it's all in their head. So they know what the bank account has to look like to be okay or not okay. They just have a fairly good level, a good grasp of what's happening cash flow wise. So I think that's how sometimes it comes about. And it's you don't know what you don't know. And so people are like, well, I've you know, the clinic might be profitable. I'm aware of it. Or if it's not, they're like, well, I know what I've got to do. We've just got to get more clients through the door. So in some ways, it's a really nice, simple approach. My mind boggles a little bit because it's so important to make conscious decisions in this space. And when it's all in your head, it's a little bit more reactive. Do we have money in the bank account or not? And a budget gives you this amazing ability to see into the future as an educated guess, but to see into the future and then make some conscious decisions now when you've got a bit more of a runway to execute. So that's the mind boggles, because I can kind of, I guess, having done it for years now, can see the importance of a budget, and also how much easier it can make certain decisions that people sometimes stew on.
There's some really nuanced and distinct points in there, because the way it perhaps catches people out is they get into a cash flow squeeze and they're like, well, actually a budget might have helped you make a decision, the same decision, but at a different time. Or you might have been a little bit more conservative, a better steward of the resources you do have than being maybe perhaps just abundant, or, you know, the generous version is like you're maybe being abundant. Maybe the worst version is you're just being naive and flying blind, a bit reckless perhaps. So I really like how you framed it up. When you then bring it up to a clinic owner that's like, hasn't really hurt us. We are where we are. We've done pretty well. What do you then, how do you approach it to sort of say, no, here's how it can make a meaningful difference to you moving forward? Like perhaps speak to some of those decisions that they can make. Maybe that's kind of the greatest reflection of having a budget, is you can make different decisions. Or what categories of decisions are you looking at that a budget really helps?
I think this doesn't specifically answer that question, but for the clinic that's not entirely sure why, or not seeing great value in why they might do it, because everything's kind of fine at the moment. Some of the examples that I use, and this is where the bigger the clinic, it becomes a bit more noticeable, and this does resonate with people, that the bigger the clinic becomes, the more responsibilities you've got. So one, there's got to be a level of responsibility and governance on your own behalf to make sure that the people that are, within your team are going to get paid and you're being responsible. But it's also, the bigger you get, the bigger the difference there is between, I think there's a time lag between profit and cash flow. So, if you're a practitioner, sole practitioner, and you know that December, January is quiet, then you generally notice that in your own bank account in that December, that New Year's period. If you're a bigger company, it's that quiet period over that time may hurt you at the back end of January, because you've kept paying some bills, you've paid some rent, and there's bigger commitments, and because of the volume of cash flow, it takes a while to realize that your cash flow has been running out of it. So it's a problem, but it doesn't really, your bank account looks its worst at the end of January rather than January 1st when it's happening. Then throw in a whole heap of payroll, and you then get to mid-Feb, and you've got your PAYG from the previous month, and that was at January, and it's big because people were still getting paid.
Yeah.
They were just on leave. And so you've still got your PAYG to do. You've probably got your super accruals if you're doing payroll tax every week. All of a sudden, you've got these big lumpy things happening in February, and you're like, here I was thinking we're now turning a profit and we're a busy clinic. We have a cash flow problem now. And it's because of what happened back in December, January. If you budgeted and you'd seen the reality of the impact of what December was going to have on your clinic and January, and you knew that back in August, then you kind of know what's going to happen, but ahead of time, and you can create a bit more of a war chest, or you can do something to help you. But the point that happens with the clinics that grow is that they have noticed that, they have experienced that firsthand, that they've realized that cash flow and profitability start to separate a bit further. And then what can happen, and this is more the fear and instilling a little bit of fear, whether that's on purpose or not, to help people do a budget, is to go, you hit a point where you can't dig yourself out of a hole because of how lumpy that expense is. If there is an 80 grand bill that you just hadn't quite planned for, that's like, you can't make that up. You can't go, I'll go and treat 20 more patients to get me on top of that. You just can't. So the bigger you get, the more of a pickle you end up in if you haven't been planning.
A great point, and that's where just looking at the bank account or visually scanning the appointment diary is just not going to suffice as you grow. What are some of I think that's a really good point. One of the decisions or future forecasts is like a 3 pay period. Do you know those months as an example, or have you factored in the leave that's going to is going to affect the revenue side of things while you're still paying those folks? A budget is a key way for you to forecast those things out. What other sort of key decisions do you use a budget for? What have you found in your own sort of business, but also coaching other clinics to see the relevance and importance of doing it?
there's a couple of things, but you touched on a really good point there around the triple pay cycle and budgeting for that. But it's also for your own state of mind that we've had those months where you look at it and you think, oh, I've just had a $20,000 loss or $10,000 loss or whatever it is. And it's a triple pay cycle. And that hurts. Or it could even be, say it's a profitable month, but you were just like, gee, we were a lot more profitable last month than this month. And it feels like you've gone backwards and you're like, I felt busier. When you've budgeted for an entire year, two things happen. One, if you've factored in a triple pay cycle, so if you've gone to kind of that level of detail, which I kind of think is the first layer beyond a very superficial budget. That first layer is having a monthly budget that factors in pay cycles. Then what might happen is you can see that in that month, let's say it's May, that when I look at my budget and what I've planned, we're going to have a $5,000 loss in that month. And you know that, and you can see that. And so when May eventually rolls around and you have a $2,000 loss in that month, that's a win. That's you ahead of budget. And that's a much nicer feeling than not having budgeted and just see a $2,000 loss sitting there and going, oh, that's not great. So it allows you to be that one step back, because if you've budgeted for 12 months and hopefully you've seen what the whole year is going to be and it's spat out a profit figure, you get this moment 12 months in advance from that profit figure to go, do I like this number? Am I happy with this? Is this reflective of the time, the risk, everything I'm going to take over the next 12 months to get there? Is this stacking up? So you feel a bit more in control of the decision at that point in time, rather than getting to the end of the year and going, oh, that's just, why did I work this year?
It's so true, because you get to the accountant meeting at the end of the year and we hear so many times, like, you're waiting for the accountant to tell you how profitable you were or not. And you go, oh, and it's never good when they're like, oh, this is where you ended up and it's not what you hoped for or expected.
Yeah, it's just nothing you can do about it at that point. So it feels like you're in a bit more control at that 12 months out, because if it's not saying what you want it to say, you get this moment to go, well, what can I do about it? Or what do I need to do about it? Do I need to reconsider what I'm spending in whatever category? Or do I need to really double down and say, well, this particular service at the clinic is just not really at the level that it should be. And I can now clearly see that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to sit down and brainstorm what needs to be done. And it can help form a 12-month plan.
I love that. I'm going to come back to the Oracle side of things, to those people that are like, yeah, but how do I forecast, 9 months, 12 months into the future with any degree of sort of sensitivity and accuracy? But before I do, you just touched on a really good point around a plan. I think if you think of every decision in your business is an investment decision, it's an investment of our time to do a certain piece of work or project or initiative or system, to recruit someone or give them a pay rise. Like, everything is an investment decision. And ultimately, I think the budget is essentially your investment plan. It is your strategic spend plan. I often say to people, it's like literally putting your money where your mouth is. If you said you're going to do all these projects or initiatives, you're actually backing it up with, well, here's where we're going to allocate our financial resources and our people, because to some degree your org chart is represented in your budget. How many admin have we got, practitioners, senior, junior, etc. And I think it's like literally putting your money where your mouth is. I see a lot of clinics prioritize like, oh, we want to do all these projects. We want to reinvent our new client intake. We want to transform our mentoring of practitioners and our CPD, and we want to get all this new tech. And that's all good, but I think they tend to lead with that. And even if you did lead with it, it often doesn't make its way back to the budget, as an example, to actually see the impact of that. Perhaps even starting with the budget and saying, this is what we have, and then how would we allocate it? I think you can kind of go both ways. But how do you then sort of future pace out 9 or 12 months for those people that say, well, I haven't got my crystal ball. None of us do. But how do I do that with a degree of accuracy, 9 months, 12 months from now? How do you answer that question for someone that is trying to pull together a financial year budget?
I think if you get too caught up in the detail, then it does become analysis paralysis, because there's no, like, you are guessing. It's definitely a progress over perfection. So I do say to people that if it's their first time budgeting, just get it down, get something down, and you're allowed to change it. So I do find with clinics in their first crack at a budget, they might fix it a month in, and then they might fix it 3 months in. Not the whole thing, but there might be 1 or 2 things that they're like, wow, I was a fair way off with that guess. So that's the first thing, is you obviously, if you're going to have to redo it every single month, then maybe it's not quite going to plan, but like, just fail forwards on it and just get it down and go from there. And each year it gets easier. But as a quick guide, it's having a little bit of a look at the previous year and going, what, like, did we grow? So let's just use a clinic that's, I don't know, say has 2 services, physio and massage. Looking at those 2 separately and saying, did our massage grow or did our physio grow, can help to then determine what's going to happen the next year. Because sitting there with last year, not knowing what really happened last year, and then going, oh, we're going to grow 30% this year, then maybe that's less growth than you had the previous year. Maybe it's a whole lot more. Maybe last year you went 10% backwards. So knowing that helps, because then the question becomes, I'm just going to throw 30% as my growth because I just like the idea of it. Then what are you going to do differently this year compared to last year? Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, but expecting a different result. And by putting down on a budget, you're going to have a different result, but then just going through the motions and doing the same thing, you're just not going to get there. So it's a nice little conscious moment like that to go, almost a little bit of a kick up the backside, to go, I want this to look differently than what it does. So what am I actually going to do about it? So it is that balance. Sometimes where, we're looking at, it might be a particular location for us, or it might be a particular service to go, I mean, I'd love it to be a bit higher, but I'm not just going to put that down on the budget, because I'm thinking of everything going on here. Go, how likely is it that we're going to make a big impact here? Might be a particular location, and we say, well, actually, we're starting a new clinic here and we're doing something else over here. I would love to make that clinic grow 40%, but realistically, that's not going to happen. So a conscious decision to do that. And really, it is us prioritizing and saying, well, we've only got so much time and it's going to go here and here. Or for those people that have the 10 projects, when you budget and go, whoa, we can't afford to do all of those 10, right? Which are the 2 or 3 that are going to be the biggest levers to make the biggest difference? That's probably what we've got to do. Or maybe it is, if we do these 2 projects first, they're going to be the biggest levers, and therefore we will be able to do projects 3, 4, and 5. If we'd started with projects 3 and 4, we wouldn't have got ourselves into a position to go back and do projects 1 and 2. So very much, as much as it's just numbers on a page and it's finance, it shouldn't, maybe people will disagree with me here, but I'm like, I don't think it should necessarily control all of your decisions from a business standpoint, but I don't think you should be making decisions without an awareness of the budget. Like, play the 2 off, and then hopefully it becomes clearer which is the right decision.
It's a really great point of, like, here's the budget and we've got to constrain the work and what we do to fit that, or here's the things we want to do and what do we need to make happen from a budget perspective. You're kind of going, A to B and B to A in a way to try and find the right mix of what you feel is going to be best. I think ultimate goal is to run a sustainable and profitable clinic moving forward, with a disclaimer of depending on what your goals are. Like if you're just acquiring clinics and aggressively growing, maybe profitability, you kick the can down the road for a bit. But I think ultimately we're trying to get clear on the decisions and the impact of those decisions, right? So practically for those using, I know at least Xero call it a budget variance report. I don't know what MyOb and that call it, but you would run a budget variance report at the end of the month, end of the quarter, and see, here's what we budgeted, here's how far off we were, how do we continue to sort of get closer to the percentage of being right or wrong, or proximal or distal to that budget number. I guess we're just looking for some degree of certainty as business owners. And I agree with you when you called it out a few years ago, because every time a clinic works with us, they do a business audit. We sort of look at a whole range of different areas in their business. The overwhelming majority will talk about their uncertainty around numbers, their dissatisfaction for the financial performance of their business, and that be a key stressor in their life and in their business. And yet, for various reasons, avoid going to doing something like a budget. I found it, originally I thought, well, they're just for accountants and boring people. Me not being the overly detailed person. But what I personally found really useful was almost the gamification of it, where it was like, if you want to be strategic, if you want to have a plan, then essentially the budget is your version to say, hey, if we do this, this is the outcome we expect. And then let's review it at the end. How close did we get? Maybe in a similar way to treating patients. I feel like people, clinic owners, practitioners are like, oh, I'm scared of my numbers. But if we went into the clinical realm and you're looking at an objective assessment using a piece of technology or some assessment, you would love numbers. I don't know, you're looking at how a patient performs in a certain assessment. You would probably find a way to grade it and try and improve it, and almost, I'm up for the challenge to try and improve this patient's result in this area. It's, I think, same in a different way. There's different language, metrics and terms. But I find it quite cool with that reframing of the gamification, the idea that you're almost setting yourself a challenge and how well did we go against that? I don't know. That's my take on making it interesting. You're more of a numbers guy. You perhaps didn't have to get that excited about it.
I think, what gets measured gets improved. General comment, but often is the case. And if you're measuring your profitability, if that logic sticks and you go, well, what gets measured gets improved, that in itself is a pretty good outcome. And think of a patient. Think if they know what they're trying to achieve, there's a number there. Again, they're more likely to go and do that exercise or get that outcome because, whatever the metric is, they're at 15 and they know that the goal's 25 and they know what they've got to do to bridge the gap. They're probably more inclined to do that rather than go, just go and do this exercise with no great context. It'll make you feel better. Putting a number to it can really help. I think it also, bringing back to budgets for a moment, I think also it's often our angst or stress comes in the unknown. And I think for a lot of people, having a budget can just help people sleep a bit better at night too. It's being a bit more conscious and feeling a bit more in control. So whatever helps you sleep. And I like
it. I like it because your point around continuing to revisit it is almost just as important as having it. Yeah. Because to that person that's like, well, how do I know that, 3 therapists are going to resign in, 2 months from now? I can't forecast that. Or you get to that point, you're like, well, I didn't forecast this. So you're just encouraging the consistency of looking at your numbers, and rather than just looking at the bank account, which is the end result, maybe go a little bit further down or up the workflow chain to be more conscious, as you said. You've often talked about intentional design, conscious design, intentional design, not only in budgets. I love that. I'm sure your budgets are very functional and look good as well, because you're very intentional about how you do things. Where does that come from? Like, is this something that you've evolved into as a business owner in your progression? Has it been something that's been more natural to you? And what does it mean to be intentional about what you're designing? Not just with like aesthetics, but also the way you show up and build an organization.
I like thank you. I think it's the positive to a maybe a bigger personality trait that's got negatives to it. But the intentional bit I like. The too intentional about everything could end up to over analysis and analysis paralysis. So that's the thing we've got to be mindful of.
The perfectionism trait that we so often hear a lot of health professionals are. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, and that's maybe the out when we're talking about budgets, to go, it's okay to then readdress it in 3 months or 6 months if it's not quite right. The intentional component, I think, to speak about our own clinic at the moment, I think we've improved with that over time. And I think when we saw the benefits of being more intentional, you then, it gathers momentum a bit. When I think of intentional, I think of almost making things more simple. So if we know our why, our really simple why as a company, and this I have spoken a bit about, that your why is more the heartbeat and the passion behind what you do, as opposed to the what being, we're an allied health clinic, we're a multi-D clinic. That's kind of what we do, but so does the clinic down the road and around the corner, and the other 15 that are within a kilometre. It's the why. When you're clear on that, you start to get clearer on who your team are going to be. You start to get clearer on what your ideal client looks like. It even starts to shape a little bit about what your clinics are going to look like, what they're going to feel like. And so this level of what can look like as high attention to detail from the outside, it's actually simple in that there's not 400 things that we run through a filter and do the checklist, and that's what gives us the intentionality of what we do. It's actually more simple than that. It's just kind of like there's just a common theme and a common thread running through every decision, which then creates what looks like very clear intention.
What is that why for Beyond? How do you articulate that, communicate that to the team, especially as it's so big? Being intentional over so many humans, so many locations, the attention to detail can be hard to consistently get right, I imagine, without good systems, without a good culture. In one version, I think the clinic owner that wants to kind of control everything, but as they grow, it becomes harder to control it. They're just trying to influence it, perhaps through systems, policies, culture, leadership, etc. So, yeah, tell me more about the Beyond why. How do you articulate it? How do you communicate it? How do you keep it alive and thriving?
So our why is we redefine the modern healthcare experience whilst empowering our team and supporting our community to move through life. There's 3 components to that, really. We redefine modern healthcare experience. So that's really simple. That means that we think everything we do has got to be that. So whether that is in advancement in tech, whether that is how the clinic feels, whether it's the experience of communication before the consult, after the consult, every touch point that we have needs to feel like we're giving someone a modern healthcare experience. And ideally, we're redefining it as in they haven't had that kind of experience before. We don't mean miles ahead and doing something that's so far ahead that people just, it's not at all what they thought they were going to get. It's just an elevation of an experience they may have had previously. Empowering our team, that becomes quite simple, that our structure, the way that we run things, the training, the autonomy we give team, it's like we're here to empower our team. So with all of our systems and procedures, how do we make sure that they support our team rather than hem them in so tightly that they aren't being able to act with freedom and flexibility? The growth of our clinic, we've had fairly strong growth over the last few years. And when we look at it, it became quite clear. We used to set targets, and maybe targets are still a good thing. We've been talking about measuring, but we used to say we want, this many clinics by this year. We've become more intentional, but a little more vague with our growth now, that we say we're going to grow at the speed at which our team need us to grow, because we're here to empower our team. And part of that's giving our team opportunities. So that's the speed of our growth, is what do our team need? And that's going to dictate our growth. The last bit is supporting our community. And, that makes sense, of course. Probably, most clinics are supporting their community in some way, shape or form. But spending a bit more time thinking about what are those ways that you can support your community. So if we look to kind of clinics for good, what are we doing other than seeing the patients that walk through the door? What else are we doing to support our community? And also, like, community can mean a range of things. So for us, community means, our own community, as in our own team. Community can mean geographically. Community can mean the broader practitioner community, the industries that we work within. But being able to look at that and go, if that's our why, what are the things that we're doing to support our community? Again, it might be local sporting clubs. It might be the pro bono work that we do with a particular charity. It's a range of things. But again, I'd like to think that every single system, procedure, everything we've implemented over the last few years, when we got really clear on our why, we can bring it back and run it through that filter and go, yep, that makes sense. And that is, to speak on the team empowerment level, we've also said to our team, like, quite openly, it's like, if we're ever doing something at this clinic that doesn't run through that filter, then, like, let us know. Where, like, we've mucked up. If that's, if you're seeing that, call us out, call anyone out, call everyone out if you see it kind of running off track a bit.
I love how you've framed that up, and I'll want to get clear on the distinction between your why, vision, purpose, mission, because sometimes these terms can be interchangeable. Your winning aspiration you've spoken about before. But what I love about that is, so often, a version of this is created by a business, a clinic specifically here, that, is very thoughtful in its creation, but so rarely used practically. It kind of exists, in a team member's induction, maybe some collateral internally on the website, but it's such a strong primary filter through which you're making decisions. And you're essentially using, a word or a couple of words there to say, well, how do we do this thing? Empower our team. What does that mean? And how do we do it practically? Example, perhaps, as you've spoken to, pathways for team members to move through their career with you into different portfolios or roles. I love that. Yeah, I remember a mentor of ours saying something very similar. If you could break down the Clinic Mastery core purpose is to support clinic owners to amplify their impact, and support is very purposefully chosen. It's like, well, what does support look like? Well, it looks like practically these things, these products, these programs, these methodologies. What is clinic owners? Well, it's, these professions in these jurisdictions. And what does amplify the impact? How would you actually articulate and measure that? So we use that as our primary filter as well. The core purpose, as we call it, how does this connect directly to our core purpose being lived out every single day? So I love that practical application component, because sometimes these things can be like fluffy, intangible, nice to have. So I love the practical application there. But yeah, just share sort of the distinction, because you and I have spoken before. I'm overlooking the author's name, but it's Playing to Win, the book. I believe it is. He talks about the winning aspiration. There's like 5 things you got to get. Maybe we can pull it up while we're here. How does that fit in? The distinction between your why, a mission, winning aspiration. Do you have a distinction more so for those tuning in and trying to figure it out? Because so much of this is interchangeable language.
Yeah, and I'll probably get it wrong, because we can literally get caught up in the language. And in the end, the simplest description for me is like, what's your why, which is, I think Simon Sinek is the big driver behind that. So our winning aspiration, it's the same thing as our why. I think the author of that book is Roger Martin, I believe.
Just got it on the screen here for those watching on YouTube. Playing to Win, How Strategy Really Works. Good book.
A lot of, I guess, the common one is vision, mission, purpose, or vision, mission, values. To use ours as an example, our why is what our teams see all the time, and what we hope and expect if they kind of retain anything, that's what they see. Our mission from our end is really just slightly more detail on our why. Again, trying to keep it simple and not too fancy. But even our mission, I have to say that we don't, I've just pulled it up as we've been talking. I can't say it off the top of my head like I can say our why. And I'll read it now. It's very similar to our why. So our mission is, we are a clinic that provides a wide scope of career opportunities to attract, nurture, and grow high-quality, fun-loving team members in an environment that redefines the experience of modern healthcare. This, in turn, helps us deliver excellent client experience to our community. We help our community, our colleagues, and our team to move through life. So for us, it's just a fleshed out version of what our why is. Little bit more detail, which I feel like just gives a bit more substance or context, because your why can be quite floaty, because it is so up in the clouds, and it's meant to be. But at some point that has to be brought down into substance and getting stuff done. So our mission just helps give it a little bit more clarity there. We think of our why as the filter that we make a decision, and then we do talk a lot about the values of our clinic, and that's the framework that we work within. That's almost a set of expectations that we have of ourselves, of each other. It gives you comfort and confidence as a team member to know that you can or should be able to rely on the rest of your team to play within the same playing field. But it's not so hemmed in that it directly stipulates what people have to do. So an analogy we use sometimes is, we hope our framework gives a guidance so that if you're in a room, then the guidance is in the diagonal corner of the room, there's a chair. The outcome is to go and sit on that chair. That's the extent of the framework. You've got the 4 walls, which are your values. Going and sitting on that chair is your, the why or the purpose. How you do that, how you get there, that's up to you. So if you want to cartwheel over there, if you want to run backwards, if you want to run around two walls and go at a right angle, do that. If you've got the outcome and you've worked within a framework, then happy days. When you're too strict as a company or an organization, and it's just what we want you to do is we want you to walk the quickest way there. We want you to walk it, not run it. And you're going to go diagonally across the room and then sit on the chair. That works until someone accidentally goes and puts a couch in the middle of the room. And the person's like, well, now what do? I can't walk diagonally. There's a chair there, or there's a couch there. Do I go over it? Do I go around it? Should I sit on the couch instead? I might go and ask someone. Okay, that's not the outcome that we want, is where people feel like the moment there's anything that's slightly different that they need to go and ask.
That's a really great analogy, because so often we hear clinic owners talk about there's so much reliance on me. That can come through a number of forms, whether that's clinical reliance, the revenue generation that you have clinically in seeing and serving patients, whether that's operationally, keep getting all these questions, become a bit of a bottleneck for progress. You can't really go on holiday because the phone or emails are pinging. And so you're really giving a framework, a paradigm for people to think as an extension of you, as an extension representation of the company in a way that everyone be happy with. If you're sort of linking it back to our purpose, our why, and our mission, then surely you're going to do all right most of the time. Yeah, that's really cool, because in a similar way, our mission at Clinic Mastery, as it is at the moment, we sort of look at it over a sort of a 3 to 5 year period at any given time. At the moment, it's a 3-year period we're using, is we're building an integrated suite of support services. So we've taken the word support from the core purpose, really emphasizing that and looking at integrated suite of support. And then so that becomes a primary filter. And, recently we decided to combine a couple of different support services into one to integrate them. And that became a really great reference point and framework for making that decision, having clarity on that mission, first of all. And so I think I really enjoy how it, as you said, simplifies decision-making. How do you then go about, either in like principles or practices, connecting the why stuff, the mission stuff with budgets? Because like they almost seem almost at opposite ends of the continuum. One's just black and white detail, budgets, and then the other, as you said, can be quite big, esoteric, almost fluffy, especially if it's not used practically. It kind of becomes as this thought experiment and wordsmithing. How do you actually merge the two to make sure that, to that point of put your money where your mouth is, that the budget reflects us doing that particularly well, and that is influencing the budget? How do you go about bringing those two worlds together?
I think the more we've done it, the more organic it happens, because hopefully that why becomes ingrained. To think of some extreme examples, we set our budget up and we have a look and we go, woof, this is not looking particularly pretty for the year ahead, or not where we want it to be. And we're like, you know what I can do here is I can fix our practitioner salaries and I can pay our team well unders. Because that clearly is not going to align with our filter of supporting our team, our community. Or it might be we're going to, let's pull all funding, every bit of funding out of supporting our local communities. That's how I'm going to fix the budget. I'm like, well, again, it's not sitting with our why. So first and foremost, if there needs to be anything drastic, what are the things that we can do that have the least impact on why we exist as a business? I'm just trying to think of even maybe a more practical example. This actually did come up where we realised that we were talking about being at the forefront of modern healthcare. and then realizing that we didn't have an allocation of tech and equipment within our budget. It just wasn't a line item, because not everyone will have that. But we're like, well, that's a bit silly. If we're really going to talk a game here, then like, where are we allocating funding and resource for it? If we don't allocate it, it's not going to happen. So that's I guess the direct transfer. It's not as conscious a decision anymore, I think, because we've addressed those things over time, e.g., a line item like that, but also it's so organic now to be thinking like that.
Perhaps even just the prompt of reconciling the question, does our budget reflect our purpose, our mission? Is our purpose, our mission reflected in the budget? How could we do more of that? Is even just the most important point, because like you said, it's continual. It's not like a one-off event. You're always trying to be better at doing it. Same is true for us. Like we just last week wrapped up our quarterly business review. It's sort of a longer meeting, look at the last 3 months and compare to budget variance report, and sort of look at then the next 3 months, and you're constantly making those little course corrections. How can we do each of these areas better, but ultimately anchoring back to the purpose and the mission.
And a thought there that just came to mind that had a big impact was we obviously focus quite a bit on our clinic fit outs and the design of them. And we had a really conscious thought process of going, if we want to visually be at the forefront of modern healthcare, then we've actually got to think beyond just the fit out we're doing right now, because at some point in time, that's going to get dated. That's going to be not in line with the game that we're talking. And so we factored in to say, well, we're probably doing a refurb every 5 years, not a full, but a significant refurb every 5 years, but a full refurb every 10. So what does it cost us to do these? And how viable is that to do it every 5 and every 10 years? Now, that might flow through to, well, if we're going to do that, then we can't be charging the consult fees that we charge. We've actually got to charge a higher consult fee. If that's the kind of environment we want our clients to be in, then we need to charge appropriately. Or it might be, well, we can't do $1 million fit outs, because if the $1 million fit out dates in 5 years' time, it's no longer in line with our brand. It just looks like an outdated, very expensive fit out. So we've got to probably tame our expense a little bit and go, how do we do this with materials that are more cost effective? But also therefore, these fit outs we can't go for on trend. We can't do things that you're just like, wow, this is so now. They need to be a little bit more timeless than that, so that they don't date as quick. We've got a couple rolling through now that, touch wood, so far, one of them's a year out from that 5-year mark of doing a refurb. It does not look like it needs anything done right now, which is great. It's a good outcome. Not all clinics will land that way, but that's where our why had a massive impact on our budget and a bigger decision to make sure that it actually stacks up financially and viable longer term.
When it comes to being on the forefront of healthcare, how do you reconcile or think about that, especially when healthcare is so, evidence-based? There's a lot of rigor around what is the best practice. Maybe this is the wrong way to think about it, but perhaps it's not always on the frontier. Like, you have to wait quite a while to figure out, well, that is the best practice. There's research that has to come about, etc. So when you think about the frontier, what does that mean? What does that look like? And perhaps more importantly, how do you go about figuring out what that is?
So if you're on an interesting point with evidence-based, and I think, the evidence-based approach I personally take is that evidence-based medicine is a combination of quality research, anecdotal, what you have experienced personally, and as well, in this instance, as client expectations and feedback. It's the crossover of the three is what creates evidence-based medicine. So I think we need to, if we're going to, from our point of view, talk about being at the forefront of modern healthcare, we need to be on top of the evidence, but we need to be really listening to clients and what they find helps and works. And our team need to be within reason, but be prepared to test things to find out what they think works as well. Just sitting back and waiting on a really, really solid body of evidence means you are not at the forefront of modern healthcare. By the time you do that, people have been doing whatever that research says for a very long period of time. So that's from a clinical point of view. But also it's things like the use of tech. So, introducing equipment like Fold, or we do a fair bit of within our women's men's pelvic health, real-time ultrasound, but even, that equipment and how much that's changed over time from something being wheeled around on a trolley to now it's a phone or it's an iPad or something that's, and the mental blank what it's called, but everything's wireless. Or it's the experience of check-ins or the use of clients at our clinic get a video walkthrough of the clinic SMS to them beforehand. So we use technology in that regard so that people feel a lot more comfortable at the beginning of their appointment, because research indicates that the more comfortable and trust someone has with a place, they're more likely to get better outcomes. So what are the ways that we can do that from a client experience point of view that helps with our outcomes? So again, every single touch point, what are we doing to be at the forefront of tech that while still makes clients feel comfortable and not shocking in the process?
Do you set up teams to do that? Is it your responsibility or someone else's responsibility to really embrace this and do perhaps some of the groundwork, the research, and bring it back to the team? How do you practically explore those frontiers? I would imagine to some degree your team that you've attracted naturally are like that, plus part of your culture is maybe to encourage that. But practically, how do you go about it as a team exploring the frontier? Is it a lot of travel? Do you sit in on a lot of clinics? How do you do that? How do you workshop it?
My brain went into a few different areas there that hopefully doesn't bore people too much with some of the things that we're doing. But what I will say is that I think what made this stand out to us was go back a few years and we realized that we fell behind on a few things. E.g., so this is going back a fair way now, but from converting from paper notes into, computer-based notes, we were a couple of years behind on that. I can't remember when it was a long time ago, but my point being was that we realized at that point, before we were clear about our why, it was a really strong point of going, this is not kind of the clinic that I'm proud of right now. I feel like we've been a bit slow. So that's how it became a bit more of no, we're going to really live and breathe this and talk about this and make it happen. I think because it's at the forefront of everyone's mind, first and foremost, because it is part of our filter, that therefore, one, that if you're going to talk that game, then you've got to consciously try and play that game. But because hopefully all of our team realize how important it is, then it's not just myself or two people that are going and looking at these things. It's just our whole team are and should be, and hopefully we've empowered them enough for them to come and say, hey, check out this new program, or I've seen this, or I've been looking into that. So we get a lot of upward pressure to do things, to change things. And you get momentum with that. So it can be hard sometimes to think, oh, well, I don't get that from my team right now. And you can't change that overnight. I agree. But talking enough to let people know, come to us with these ideas. Say that to someone once and they're probably not going to come to you with an idea. But when they see that behavior and culture again and again and again, and then people start doing it and they see that it's been heard and it's been looked at, and regardless of whether it's done or not, and hopefully there's enough wind on the board that people see that, oh, this stuff gets done. But even if it's something that doesn't get done, that they can see time and effort and logic, and it's explained, hey, this was a good idea. It just doesn't align for these particular reasons. Or, hey, we had a crack at that 3 years ago. This is what didn't work. Before you're part of our team, this is what didn't work. But if they can see that there's been a real thought process and time, then you're going to get more and more of these ideas. Where I went with this thought process that could be a bit boring was we have also set up an org chart, or a more functional org chart, that we don't necessarily have people that this is their specific job. That when we have a project, we think of a project more in terms of who are the right people, regardless of what their role is within the practice, who's got a passion for this, who wants to work in this space, and who makes the most sense to lead that team. I think if you always go back to job roles, then, say in my case, being CEO of the group, then any project I'm part of, people would just assume, oh, well, Shane will take the A on that and make sure that it all happens. But I sit within project groups where I don't have the A on it, that someone else is controlling that project. I'm there if I think I can add value, or if that person wants me in the team. But it's going to be driven by whoever is the best person for that, for that project, and whoever's going to get the best outcome.
So with such a degree of emphasis on frontier of medicine, empowering team, this sort of experience around clients, this experience around team members, how do you know you're doing a good job of it? How do you measure that? How do you track that with all this work that it is leading to great outcomes for clients and for team members?
Probably a few ways that we can look at it, but I guess there's a few key markers that we look at in a clinic. We push fairly hard, and by push fairly hard I mean it's in a follow-up email for new patients to the clinic, is a net promoter score. Based on your experience, at beyond how likely are you to recommend a friend or colleague, friend or family member. By push it means that we're not asking them 20 different things. It's just a kind of, if we're going to ask someone one thing, it's their experience at our clinic. So we get that kind of feedback. We obviously track word of mouth referrals. If people aren't happy, they're probably not going to refer someone to the clinic. Rebook rates, cancellation rates, that sort of thing. You've got a really high cancellation rate, then people are probably not seeing value in your practice. A really low rebook rate, they're not getting the outcomes that they want. So there's a collective of all of those things help us. Google reviews. From a team point of view, we do an equivalent MPS, we do an EMPS. How likely are you to recommend, we do it every 9 months, how likely are you to recommend a friend or colleague to work at Beyond?
Why 9 months?
So it's not so soon that people remember what they marked it last time. We plucked it as a number. Sometimes it almost feels like it's too long. We've definitely had periods of time where we're like, we've implemented a lot of change here. Geez, I'd love to know that, get a climate test across 80 people as to whether they're happy about it or not. So I do wonder whether we should move it to be a bit more sporadic. We've also been strategic sometimes, where when we've done something that we feel like, I'm trying to think of an example. Actually, when we grew quite significantly, and it definitely felt like a different climate. And often with that change, people realize what they're now lacking, what they're now missing. We did an EMPS at that point in time very strategically to go, what is how the team feeling after bringing on we bought a practice that had a team of 26, and it made a big difference to the size of our team. So yeah, we are strategic sometimes about when we do that EMPS, not to get a good answer, to get the right answer, which is like we need to just stress test what we've just done and see, whether we can make some improvements. A weird one, I think we've spoken about this before, and is sick leave. We track that to see with team engagement.
What are you looking for
there's
there?
definitely
And what are you looking for there in the sick leave? Are there certain benchmarks that you use from external benchmarks or internal benchmarks? Like what are you looking at for trends there?
We like to see sick leave as low as possible. We track it per full-time equivalent, because otherwise if you're a growing team, then the number of hours in sick leave is going to grow, and so it's not giving you a good cross-reference. So we do it per full-time equivalent. Same with headcount. It doesn't quite work, because if you've got some team that are 12 hours and some that are 38, and you could have or one person leaves and 3 come in that are, so headcount doesn't work. It's got to be per FTE to get a true balance. Really what we're looking at is for that to be as low as possible and as stable as possible. Now, we know there's blips this time of year with flu, so we expect it to go up a bit. It's when you see an incline over time, or an incline at a point where there kind of shouldn't be and there's no logical reason, that's more what we look at to go, why are our team feeling a bit tired or burnt out, or why are they getting a bit sick? And I mean, one pattern we often always see, because we track it in line with annual leave for FTE. Often when annual leave has been low for a period of time, you'll see sick leave increase slightly because people just aren't getting a break. So that's one pattern we see, but otherwise we just want to make sure that it's low. We saw some big patterns in and around COVID too.
Unusual patterns?
Some of them were logical. Some of them weren't. It was almost, trying to think when it was after COVID, like when it was really, from a COVID point of view, really dying down, but people weren't using their annual leave yet because they couldn't travel overseas, or people were still a little bit hesitant to jump on a plane. And so annual leave was low. There wasn't the sick leave being taken because of COVID, but we started to see it go up a bit. And we could see, we're just like, jeepers, team, you need to take some annual leave. That year we decided to actually shut the clinic entirely over Christmas, New Year's, which we'd never done. I think we also, because it kind of triggered a fair amount of, and not a fair amount, but it might have been 6 to 8 days of annual leave for team to take. We also gave them an extra day and a half. We finished up a couple of days pre-Christmas. Conscious decision to try and get a whole team to have a break.
So you've grown quite a sizable organization, especially if we put it into comparison to your typical clinic that's out there. And it's not the road for everyone, but you've definitely pulled together an incredible culture and brand. It's a well-known brand. What do you think other clinic owners get wrong when trying to navigate such a growth journey like you have, whether that's through acquiring others locally, whether that's just sort of aggressive growth on getting new clients, recruiting as quickly as they can, and growing headcount, perhaps locations? What do you think they get wrong most, having got plenty of things wrong myself, and I'm sure you would say so too? What do you think they get wrong or overlook when navigating such a more aggressive growth journey?
I think the first simple answer there, and you hit the nail on the head when you said it's not for everyone. It's people that are growing that don't know why they're growing, and they think it's the right thing to do. That's really, if you wanted a really simple answer, it's like that's where it goes wrong. people haven't aligned it with what they want and what is the best practice for them and what they want out of life. There is, I think of this, you see this within Clinic Mastery. There's just the best clinic is the clinic that is so purposeful towards what that clinic owner, wants as the outcome. That's the greatest clinic. So yeah, that's the simple answer. In terms of for those people that do want to grow and it is aligned with what they want to do, where does it go wrong, or where can it go wrong is underestimating the importance of culture. So if you're buying another practice, getting hung up in the legalities and the sale negotiation and ticking those boxes, but actually, like, it's just, that's the easy stuff. It is, does this clinic align? What are the team like? What level of alignment is there right now? Because if you don't get that right, it's just not gonna work.
It's a wonderful note to end on, because we started the conversation really with being conscious, being intentional about what you're trying to build, whether that's through literally the budget, whether that's through the brand and the culture that you're designing, the client experience, the team experience. And ultimately, it all comes back to what do you want and why are you doing this? And everyone's got their different reasons. That's why we're not big believers that there is, one size fits all. There's no cookie cutter clinic. We're all about personalized experiences, getting clear on what matters to you, what matters to your family, and creating a clinic that suits that. Because it's hard enough. It's hard enough running a business. Like, there's so many ups and downs. So the more conscious, the more purposeful, more intentional you are, hopefully that leads to a more fulfilling journey rather than one that's resented, crazy, stressful, anxious, because those moments certainly do happen.
Absolutely.
Shane Bennett, very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing and connecting a number of dots that perhaps aren't obvious. Budgets, purpose, the intentionality of and crossover of client experiences and team member experiences as well. No doubt listeners, viewers have gleaned something really important, if not practice, a principle that they can use in their clinic today. For those tuning in, thank you. We'll see you on another episode very soon. You can go to clinicmastery.com for all the show notes and come over to YouTube, hit subscribe and see not only the podcast, because from time to time we do share our screen and you can see what's going on, but also we're publishing a lot of useful content, how-tos on a regular basis for how you can grow a sustainable clinic, build a clinic for good, a sustainable clinic that does good for the local community and aligns purposefully with what matters to you. Shane Bennett, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
We'll see you on another episode. Bye for now.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in to the Grow Your Clinic podcast. To find out more about past episodes or how we can help you, head to www.clinicmastery.com/podcast. And please remember to rate and review us on your podcast player of choice. See you on the next episode.